Challenge B. Now it's a phase in which we're introducing the Trustless Computing Association. So the association which has organized this series, which is 6th edition, and want to just explain to you what is our vision, what we are, and also what is our proposal to answer to these challenges. And the goal of Trustless Computing Association is to build our digital utopia. I mean, since IT were now starting to get widespread with the internet and web, there's been a high expectation that IT could provide more freedom, automatic democracy, everyone can become a newspaper, everyone can talk to each other, it's democratic, we could vote online, and all these expectations have turned into somewhat of a dystopia here in this moment, with Facebook and privacy not being here, AI, what's going to happen with AI, and so on and so forth. Our vision is that within the dystopian ideas, it's still possible to create a utopia. It's not the default scenario under the direction we're taking. Actually, we think that the direction we're taking is going towards dystopia, but it is possible to go towards a positive future of IT for humanity. So the main goal of our vision is to create an international certification body, which again ensure levels of security which are extremely high for our IT systems, for communications, and even the AI systems which are going to be in all the matter of life. One key aspect of creating this ultra-secure IT is that this IT will also need to be compatible with law enforcement, because if it's too secure, then the state cannot spy on criminals and so on and so forth. So we see these two problems as one problem. So what is our vision? Our vision is on the human computing is a future where we have our digital sphere. You go on Facebook, go on the internet, it's the equivalent of the squares and streets that we used to be before the IT. And that's quite successful. You go there and you meet all kinds of people, you make new friends. It's kind of like going in a big square, anytime you want, in a street. And you can buy things, they advertise you a lot of stuff on Facebook and so on, and that's been successful. But on the private sphere, so before internet, we used to have our bedroom, our living room, our political party office, or the church, where we had expectation of levels of privacy up until we committed a crime. We had a freedom of assembly. All that is completely gone now. Why? Because our public sphere and private sphere are all inside the same device, the smartphone. And so the same tool that is providing your square and streets is supposed also to provide your bedroom and your living room. And it just can't do it. Just because even if they want it, there's no way you can reconcile the complexity of creating this beautiful square and shopping center with the needs of creating a safe enough bedroom and living room. So our vision is that everyone has a mobile phone. Well, mobile phones since 2014 have been 4.5 millimeter thin. There were two models called Vivo and Oppo, which were only 4.75 millimeter thin. Now they're made 80 millimeter thin, all the phones. Why? Because 4.5 millimeter is too thin to handle. So there is 2-3 millimeters in the back of every phone, which are empty space, which could be possibly occupied by another device, something else which is radically more secure. You could, under our vision, you could have on one side you have a phone, you flip it around, and you have this super secure place. And so we reinstate in the cyberspace the balance between the public sphere and private sphere as it was before. And so we believe that this is an achievable goal, and not to achieve perfect security, but a security which is high enough to feel comfortable and restore also balance in our democracies, and for freedom and democracy. The AI part of our utopia is this image. You may find funny. This image came out in an article on The Economist maybe a year ago, talking about the positive scenario of AI. There are many different opinions of what positive scenario of AI could be, but one of them is the fact that AI could do all the dirty work, all the work that nobody wants to do. And so our time will be spent enjoying life, producing art, creation, playing sports, anything that we do like. And one scenario to refer to is historical Athens. At the age of democracy in Athens was an incredible boom of creativity. And you had a lot of enjoyment, arts, and was a great flourishment of arts and philosophy. And that happened because for every citizen there were 10 slaves doing the hard work. So this could very well be what would happen in society if we manage the machines do everything that we don't like to do. Okay? So there is an incredible hope that this could create, raise the happiness of society greatly. So this is a goal. Is this achievable? We believe it is. It's going to be hard. The chances maybe less than 50%, substantially less, but still it could be doable, and it's I think very worthwhile to pursue. We have had partners of all kinds in this story since 4 years, from the nation of Italy and the nation of Austria, which wanted to find standards for the state secret, which were more secure, the city of Barcelona, the Lombardia Informatica, technical partners, the largest cybersecurity associations of Europe, which is EOS, recently Swisscom. We're talking with the Canton of Geneva, is looking at this kind of technology, also creating economic development opportunities. We have a bunch of advisors which include the 3 professors in Stanford. We have the chief information officer of Austria, former head of IT, or head of security of Nokia, which is now working for Huawei, understandably. The economy is moving all some of the top cryptographers. And so we have attracted lots of talents and also a critical mass of organizations which could actually make this, possibly help us make this a reality. Trustless. So the word trustless, is still, first of all, there's a lot of confusion and doubts. It's felt as a negative term, so being criticized a lot for this term trustless. So why do we call it trustless? First of all, trustless, if you go in a dictionary, means first of all distrustful and untrusting, and the second meaning is not trustworthy, which they're kind of contradictory. There are 2 meanings which are the contrary. So we mean it for the first meaning, distrustful and trusting. Our idea is that the only way to achieve something that is meaningfully trustworthy is to be completely untrustful, distrusting. So trusting nothing and nobody. That's the only way you can have levels of security. That's similar to what I mentioned earlier this morning. The principle Huawei has these principles which they apply not fully, which says it's the ABC principles for security of Huawei, which says A for assume nothing, B like believe nobody, C check everything. And so and this is a principle which is following what we're doing. Of course, with Huawei, they're not including themselves in the picture, so we just have to trust the way they implement that. Trustless doesn't mean that you don't believe in human being. Why? Because the most trustless system that we ever experienced is our voting system. When we go to vote in democracies, in a good, well-implemented voting process, you're not trusting anybody. There's these voting booths with 5 randomly selected citizens or of different parties, which are always present, and there are organizational processes around it, which radically mitigate the scenario by which someone could actually skew the election. Well, the other word also was rendering the meeting, but it's not proper. And so, in this system, you're not trusting your government, you're not trusting your prime minister, security agencies, you're trusting the inherent resiliency of the organizational processes that are around. A resiliency that any citizen can judge, right? You can just read how these people are selected and you're fine enough. And so when you go to vote, you say, I'm not just trusting someone, I have a reasonable expectation that my vote will count, okay? And this is the greatest invention of security of humanity. And we're actually literally implementing many of these citizen witness kind of mechanisms, citizen jury, to secure IT. And by the way, all of this works only because human nature is good to a certain extent, because all the process we described for voting wouldn't work if someone would go there and pay like 100,000 to all the 5 of them and have them pay. But then people are good, people have a family, and so on and so forth. So it's a positive in regards to human nature. Another reference to Trustless is back in 30 years ago, Reagan and Gorbachev signed intercontinental ballistic treaty to limit the production of missiles, and that treaty just finished 2 months ago. You probably read about the news. And during those negotiations, Reagan said, no, their principle was trust but verify. Well, the system they set in place should have been trust or verify, because 30 years later, that treaty is off, and we don't know who fell to go by the treaty, right? If it was well done with some third-party observance, at least we would know that someone is just backing out because, and someone was breaching it. Now we don't get to know, because there was too much trust in the picture. Reagan and Gorbachev were two friends, so it didn't feel proper to be investigating each other too much. And so we have now a chance to do things better. So how bad is humanity? We have Richard Stallman, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs in 1983 had this famous commercial. Who remembers this commercial? Can you raise your hand? A commercial in 1983 when he was, okay, so this is a textbook study in advertising in which he claimed that IBM, which actually we have a member of IBM here, was about to take over and become a Orwellian future by buying your stuff as a personal computer different from the mainframe. You would have freedom and security and so on and so forth. He's been pitching this, been very successful, and making a ton of money. Still to date, Apple claims to be privacy, but the reality is not at all that. The reality is that nearly everyone is hacked. It's not only the prime ministers that you elect, but us, it's all broken. And except possibly some inside the intelligence agencies for certain things that they do, which is not good. How bad is AI? So in the AI, we're approaching a time in which you have self-driving cars, you have AI doing your diagnosis, AI drones, and all of these are huge risks. No, not to mention the long-term risk, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Challenge B, Challenge C, with many experts on AI safety, is the fact that if someone can hack into a connected car or an autonomous car, they can hack into one and take control, automatically means they could do it on 10,000, 100,000. They could kill thousands of people, and they would kill an industry. So security here is still a huge issue, and that's going to be also, that is what separates us from being able to experience these innovations. Until they will achieve this level of security, which are radically higher than what we have today, we will never see them on the street. Or we will see them on the street and we will have a major accident and we will not see them for 10 years. And so this is the situation we're starting from. This scenario here there was an history on a stadium in the US where some hobbyists took a drone and took some flyers and put it in a stadium. 3 hours later, drove to another stadium, did it again to just drop flyers. But these flyers could have been just biological weapons and kill everybody, right? And that's where Air Force has also contacted us, the US Air Force, because they have an accelerator in Boston. They're trying to solve these kind of issues, and good luck. It's a lot of work. How deep is IT? How broken is IT? So people think that they can get security with an app, but then trust cannot be added. We mentioned this morning, but we phrase it again. U.S. Defense Science Board, the leading expert body, said trust cannot be added by integrated circuits after fabrication. So if you were not there during the chip fabrication, no way you can ensure that there is some level of security, because people can put the back door unless you were actually watching that certain things were done during the fabrication. The most famous security expert in the world said that all CPUs are compromised by what we learned from NSA. Michael Seaver said, no, I mean, it's ridiculous, that nations in Europe think that they can have sovereignty, or only use American software, they have Chinese hardware, and rely on a famous Russian to tell the vulnerabilities. He said this in 2015 during our first event, and nothing has changed since. And the famous Russian is Kaspersky. Perception versus reality, and we talked about it before in some of the challenges. The perception is still people read the news and see that FBI is complaining they can't crack Telegram, they cannot crack Signal, because they need to convince people that stuff is more secure than it is, so that criminals will use it and they can surveil them. Companies like Apple, Signal, and so on, they're happy to be portrayed as great solutions and great champions of privacy, good for the brand, good for the business. Everybody's happy, except citizens and us, and possibly nations, and governments. So it's not the NSA and CIA that can hack into this vulnerability, even the most secure devices, but a 14-year-old teenager from Ukraine or from Arizona. A recent history about video chat of system of Apple. So the world is turning into a hacker republic, literally, in where it used to be that heads of state, rich people and financial power had the power. Well, that power is shifting to those who have the most informational and hacking superiority. So national actors or we can't read very well, state actors and non-state actors. So those actors that have the most power to hack into devices for getting information or hack into devices to make them crash, they have increasingly more power. And they're actually more and more getting the power in the world. Vladimir Putin said, whoever's going to lead the race to AI is going to rule the world. Well, maybe it's not who actually is going to control formally the AI, but the actors which are going to be able to most hack into the AI are going to have even more power, or as much power as those that mostly control the AI. So this is how central now control of information and security are becoming to our society. We won't go through this, so these are the principles of why current certifications and bodies are not secure. They're broken by design, they're not comprehensive enough, they're subject to pressure from states to actually purposefully have wrong crypto standards, and that's been proven by Snowden revelations and so on and so forth. So there's a huge amount of problems which are by design. It's not an accident. That's why there's a need for a new certification body and technologies that comply. So why is everything broken? So first, no, technically everything is broken because these systems are simply way too complex, huge complexity. Systems are black boxes, are obscure. So in order to protect intellectual property, companies make it secure. So they obfuscate the code. They don't release the schematics of the hardware. And so this provides, between the security and complexity, objective, really difficulty to make things secure enough. And so there is no control of all the supply chain. I think Michel mentioned how important it was for Apple the fact that they control the supply chain, but then you control the supply chain, but they don't control, it's too complex, you still couldn't do it, even if you wanted to. So as you said, Apple doesn't necessarily want to, but even if they wanted to, they couldn't even provide that kind of level of security. So these are the main problems. And so that's the literal problems that we have. But then, is this really a technical problem? Is this something that was just, we couldn't solve so far? Or is it, the system was never broken, it was built this way? So was this broken by design? I mean, it's because we were so good with airplanes. Only 1 out of 60 million flights has a problem. Imagine how difficult it is to run an airplane to fly all around the land without people dying. So we were extremely good at technology, extremely good at certifications. Federal Aviation Administration was established in 1929. As they were established, extremely stringent, in the next 9 years, the market grew for 7 times. So instead of, with these very stringent standards, instead of the market shrinking, it got higher because people felt safer to go and fly. No? So, and they were very successful. Atomic Energy, it's a UN agency that's, verifies the compliance to energy, atomic energy research and stockpiling. It's been quite successful. That's why we're still alive here. So, given a choice of privacy and safety, people voted safety. So, since everything was broken by design because security agencies needed to have access, people started to discover about that. And even after Snowden, people didn't vote to have like extreme privacy laws and so on, because if the choice is between safety of your family and privacy avoiding terrorism, people choose safety. So the only way if we can have freedom and then in turn safety, because freedom is about the safety, is by solving both problems. So these are graffiti in Brooklyn that kind of like try to ask this question: would you rather be free or safe? It's not a question you can answer. That's why there's no question mark. Because it's really, you can't choose between the two. You have to find a way to do a win-win solution, a win-win solution. Because if you only predominate safety, then you're broken your own democratic system, and in turn you're creating war, and you're having madmen heads of your country. So, we discovered that meaningful digital freedom and safety are not necessarily an either-or choice, but they are a both or either challenge. And we discovered that that could be solved by applying exactly the same principle, the same exact trustless safeguards that you need to ensure this level of security. You apply to the process, mechanism, or organization that you will use to guarantee that this access to information is not abused too much. So what are the principles guiding this new certification body? One, unique levels of transparency, unique level of auditing, unique level of oversight, unique level of governance or certification. So transparency, every single thing should be verifiable in its source design, software, hardware, procedures, and so on. And people thought it was impossible, and instead it is. If you simplify and start from open components. Auditing, so you should have extreme level of security review by experts in relation to complexity. Someone talked about open source this morning. If you have open source component, but it's 10 million lines of code, if you spend the rest of your life, you won't be able to find vulnerabilities. If your operating system is 15,000 lines of code, well, you have a higher chance. And then also the ethicity of the experts. If experts are, you pay $1 million, some experts to verify the security of your system. They find a bug, and they're only after the money, they will sell it to the highest bidder. And there are major nations willing to pay millions of euros for hacks into communication devices that rich and powerful are using. So you need to find some kind of social mechanism to attract people that you maximize the chance that they will give it to you, people that are not for sale. Now, some people don't believe that that's the case. People are cynical and believe everyone is for sale, but surely at different prices, and some people are actually not for sale. And so you need to maximize that. Overseeing, you have processes by citizen witness and citizen jury that you can put inside the supply chain and life cycle management to further decentralize and make more accountability. And then you have ultimately the backstops at this certification body, this third-party organization. You need to find some kind of political design, democratic engineering. Where's my friend Troy? Troy, there you go. So the key at the end, the backstops at the design of this certification body, and to what extent the democratic engineering of this organization reliably ensures technical proficiency, accountability, and ethical stance. And that's a purely political science problem. And which most people that created a democratic constitution have been facing, with more or less success. And sometimes this success lasts a certain amount of time and then it degenerates. So this is a crucial problem and ultimately the key problem of this. So disruptive text. We haven't talked about any disruptive text. We've talked about technologies which are current, open technologies, open source technologies, time-tested, battle time-proven processes. These are the core, because we do have the technology to do this. We just need to find it in a way in which you have lawful access, necessities even there. But then, how do blockchains, AI, and quantum computing fit in the picture? These technologies are, on one side, they create potential vulnerabilities for such technologies. Quantum computing could decrypt many of the encryptions that we have now. AI is used to attack our systems, and so you have a further attack. At the same time, AI can be used within your system to spot if there's a malware. Quantum computing is used to generate quantum random number generators, which are, when you're doing encryption, it's crucial to have a source of random numbers which are really random, and it's a really complicated thing to do, and so there's high hopes that quantum could actually increase. Well, all of these in use for increasing the security of the system could bring more security, but also could bring vulnerability. So the way in which we work with these technologies is to have them as a redundant layer. So we mainly solve the problem we're facing with current open, time-tested, time-proven, battle-tested component. But then have a fallback, or like a redundant layer in which a quantum, for example, a blockchain, could provide more resiliency for the log not being erased or not being changed, but that's only on a fallback. So if the blockchain layer fails, it can't compromise the main system, right? So this is one way in which you can embed the systems inside this architecture, ultra-secure architecture, without compromising. At some point, the blockchain layer may be more secure than traditional, and then you would switch. But that's definitely not the case now? Well, depending on some use cases. I'm not going to go in the detail of this. So this is just a diagram to tell you what is the trustless computing relates. It's not like an island. It relates to existing standardization bodies like common criteria, national lab. So it comes in ecosystem of already existing certification bodies. GDPR, EI, we actually are downward compatible to that. It's going to be common criteria 3. So these are complicated things. I'm not going to get into this unless you are a certification expert like my friend Paul, who just arrived. I think we're not going to get into that. And but it also shows you how this relates and create a whole ecosystem, because at the end, all of this creates economic dynamics, pressure dynamics, which are important. And so, how do we prevent abuse? Technically, we prevent abuse by criminals by making so that there is an access at the service level by law enforcement. I'm going to make it very, very simple. So these systems of communication, we have devices which are ultra secure. Even though the architecture is peer-to-peer, they could also not need any server room. Still will have a server room which will have backup of the data, encrypted data and the keys, which is needed because the user could die. The user could lose his passphrase. You still need a key recovery under 99% of cases. So you still need to safeguard this information. So, and you also need to safeguard it from insider threat. And this same process with the server can be used to let governments show up and say, I have probable cause of crimes being committed, and so please let me in. And so the system with devices very complex. It makes technology and processes, but at the bottom it's using very secure technology, and it's using 5 randomly selected citizens that act as a citizen jury with an attorney that act as a filter between the needs and mandate of the nation to protect you and pursue an investigation, and the need to make sure they're not abusing it. And so this is one part of it. It has many aspects of it, which gets very complicated. It even has a replication of the server room in different countries, so that under some scenarios of abuse or forceful pressures, you could have an option by these 5 randomly selected citizens to actually pretend to punch the wrong keys, and all the information get burned and are saved in a different country. I will not get into much detail of this. It's all problem itself. We've been working it for 10 years, but there's a lot to read afterward. Another problem is, if you have all this software and hardware being openly available, what prevents a group of criminals and terrorists to take this technology and build a version of this technology without this lawful access, and therefore being beyond the capability of nations to intercept them? Well, this is a more complicated issue. We've been talking to a European Defense Agency and the deputy head of Secret Service of Italy and many others, and we found that by creating an architecture which is a hardware architecture which is artificially complex from the manufacturing point of view, you ensure that it can only be produced in medium-sized foundries, which can be overseen by intelligence and possibly stopped if it goes. If this fails, then it will be that some hardware components will not be completely transparent, but will remain translucent. So not everyone will have access to it, but we'll have some trustworthy third party which will do the verification of the security of these components. So this is it gets complex. No, IT is complex. I'm sorry. I've been trying to simplify things. This is what it is. So these are the trustless computing paradigm. We've been running this for 4 years with the participations of many people, and including some people in this room. And we basically go very quickly on it. So number one, you should assume that there's nations willing to invest tens of millions to break your supply chain. 2, you need to have oversight, like we talked about, on all the supply chain. You need to have extreme levels of security review. We talked about that. You need to have royalties, which you couldn't have someone knocking on your door saying, okay, you have to pay this patent or unless you shut down, because they could have a pressure on you to put a backdoor. Open source software, open verifiability, but also it makes so that they are more likely to attract those people that are not for sale. That's also one key thing to have open source, as opposed to publicly verifiable software in its source code. Then we have the crypto systems, which are long-standing, which have been proven by time. We have we said governance, technically proficient, independent, as we said. And then this is the process we talked about before. So we have these 5 randomly selected citizens that need to be able to access this information so that you can actually, they let you go to market, and this is achieving overall a public good. So what is our strategy? Some of you may know this guy in this picture. This guy is called Roberto Baggio. Roberto Baggio is a very famous soccer player. He was in '92. Davide, when did we win?
Too much.
He's too young. He's a new generation of Italian politicians which are very young. That's a really good thing. And so he's a very great player. I think he led Italy to win in 1992. And one of his techniques, he was so able to dribble that...
1990 or?
What's that?
1990.
1990, exactly. He was so enabled to dribble while going to the goal that some of the defense players would actually fall down, right? And so, as a strategy, we're creating this certification already as a standalone thing. We don't need any approval of any nation, so on. As long as it's a critical mass of entities that are going to be adopting it, like banks, or being end users like cities or technical partners, nations that give it some reliability, consultancies. But then again, if you want to attract the critical mass, you need to play within the game. So there is, and nowadays here in Europe, we have the European Cybersecurity Framework, which is a process by which new standards are being created, which is, European Union. And then you have the ITU, which is another place where companies go there and go and create new standards. But then the creation of these standards suffers the pressures that we have, so that these standards are never meaningful enough. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to, our standards will fit, will actually, they already are in the process of qualifying as standards in the European Union. They are in the process of, as candidates in the ITU, even though there is nearly no hope whatsoever that anything will come out which is going to be meaningful because of the pressure right now. But this allows the partners we're trying to attract to be able to jump on our boat without being perceived that they're getting on a rogue project. Okay, so this is kind of the strategy that we have, and it's working out successfully up until now. Major vision. So if we're successful with all this, Trustless Computing Association will become a respected international certification body, which could be, it could be inspired to the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court is a governmental institution, but it was created by the coalition for the ICC. Troy knows very well about this. It was a coalition non-profit that actually spurred these and put these countries together to create an organ which is fantastic. I mean, has great goals and so on. And so there is a hope that this creation of the standards can actually spur the creation of treaties, and this could actually become something that the nations can endorse and can provide trust between nations, which means peace and so on and so forth. The governance model that we're creating with the Trustless Computing Association needs to be so resilient in the short term, long term. So it needs to be so accountable that maybe this could become an inspiration for a new form of UN. So a UN 2.0. So this could inspire new global organizations which are more accountable and more meaningful and so on and so forth. And so to finish up my presentation, I'm sorry if it was too long, this is the core vision. And this is a vision which we're pursuing with your association and also with the startup spin-off. Our startup spin-off, which is called Trustless AI, which is based here. We have our office down here in Fusion, and we are building this device. Let me just show you like a small, very initial demo of this device. So this is not the actual device which we'll have to build over the next 2 years, but basically scenarios that you will have, you could have a device which is just a normal phone, same size, same weight, but then it happens to have a second screen in the back. And the second screen is way more simple. It's a completely separate device, so you have completely separate supply chain. But you as a user, you just you have to pay a little extra price to having this security, and you can have this public sphere and private sphere. That's it. So, open for questions. Sure, sure.
I have a question, but I think it's just a little statistical correction. Maybe you said that you talked about the example of planes, 60 million flights and all that. I think it's not 60 million flights. I think it's 60 million passenger miles. Maybe that's important because I think it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, you don't measure flights, you measure passenger miles. So this is just for the and it's important because to know. You always measure all trips, whether it's flights or cars.
Yeah, sure. I will check on that. It's very possible that, but overall, there's a wide consensus that flight and airlines that have quite a success,
they're
less dangerous than cars and other
they're safer per passenger miles. Yeah, that's the thing. You mentioned also that one thing which seemed to me which was contradictory because you mentioned at one point that there were some random hackers who find exploits and who sell them to the highest bidder, right? It could be anybody, right? It could be you, me, anybody who just spends time and it's not people with millions of dollars. It's going to be just people who are technically minded and who spend the time and who just go and find something, right? And then sell it to companies who might themselves not sell it to governments or whatever. So that's one thing. You said that, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, before you said that the NSA, we can sort of safely assume that Apple or whatever, that NSA invests billions of dollars, it's true, and that if they do it, that they should know all the holes and exploits, and that doesn't seem plausible that just any random person would. But that's two contradictory statements. I think that your first statement is correct, that we should not assume in general. There's a big principle, and that goes back also broken by design. I don't think it was not broken by design. It was simply broken from the start, not by design. By design means intent. When anybody of us starts a product, we do it in a simple way, we put it out, and it's broken in the sense not safe. And then we notice, and then we improve it. But we didn't, on purpose, break it from the start. The first technology, all of it is always, in a sense, broken, but it's not by design. So what we have to do, we have to make it safe by design, the other way around.
Okay, so in regards to this, basically, now, when companies, when I say companies break their system by design, really just put yourself in the mind of this company. So this company are in a position that, of course, they need to provide as much security that they can, but at the same time, they need to enable governments at any given time to be able to break in to do their access, and they need to do it on their own, right? So, as a company, you need to ensure that at any given time, a number of nations have multiple access ways because some access could not work at a certain time, and so you need to make sure that this happens. So, to make sure that this happens, on one side, you just think about performance and make things so complex, So I didn't do it by design. It's just so complex that they will find it, right? Instead of doing something just secure systems, then it's harder to just make sure that these holes for governments are there just by accident. So what you do, you just slip in errors which are plausibly deniable. So if you actually put a backdoor and you design it and you engineer it in a way that when it's discovered, you cannot say it was just by accident, because by the way it was designed, it was, it seemed like it was something that, let me just finish it correctly. So if you actually design a backdoor, when it is discovered, then you say, okay, how come there is a backdoor? And that's a very bad publicity for the provider and possibly the government where this provider is. So you guys provide a backdoor in more systems. So the whole situation we have now makes so that the best way to make a backdoor is make it look like an error. And so this makes so that also these backdoors are also way worse, and so they could be found by other people. And so when I say the engineer in because you let them in, you don't even go to the extent of security that I do, because if you go there, they won't even let you go to market. So they don't even offer these kind of products levels. You see?
I think there are three cases. Either you put in a backdoor by design. Here, I agree. But then it's not broken. It's a feature which is in a sense lawful because you said yourself you have to adopt government, so it's not broken, it's a feature. Secondly, I was a programmer, and I know that whenever you program something, you cannot think of everything, you make mistakes. And there are errors and mistakes, so if you find a hole, most holes are not there because you left them on purpose. I mean, if you know programming, you know that. Most holes are there because you discover under different usage and so forth that, oh my God, you know, there's an overflow stack and suddenly I have access, you know, it happens. So, but the point is, the greater point is, it doesn't matter. Rufo, we shouldn't even care about the intent or not. It's there. It doesn't matter for our purpose.
Okay.
We're wasting time, whether there's intent or not. We have a certain goal, right? We shouldn't even waste time on intent or not.
Well,
Because
no,
intent is just, whether there's intent
well,
or
to
bad.
tell you the truth, okay, it's, intent is kind of impossible to be certain about intent. No,
That's my point. So that's not your point.
and no one is talking about certainty. We're trying to estimate things. For example, the UK government now is analyzing Huawei 5G technology. And the one initial report said, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, said, oh, well, we found a way to mitigate the risk, and so it's kind of fine. Then now they've done possibly another arm of JCHQ made the analysis, and they say they found the systems to be very, very vulnerable, very, very shoddy technology. Of course, they can't get into intent. They can't say, no, the Chinese government put vectors. And the Chinese government and the Huawei, if they did put it on purpose, they have a huge incentive to put a vector that looks like an error, because if when found looks like something that couldn't be an error, you are in deep trouble. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And so basically, nearly all vectors, you cannot say if it's a vector. In fact, I wrote an article like 10 years, when Spectre and Meltdown. Did anybody hear about Spectre and Meltdown? Spectre and Meltdown, yeah, okay, so half the people here. There was a discovery that for over 10 years, some of the most widely used processors, even in high security things, were completely vulnerable to leakage. Now, these processors are used to virtualize systems, and so they're all broken. And so apparently it was just a bad design, but then it's a bad design that came from the architecture, from the security of this architecture, and so on and so forth. And you could very well argue, like Brushnari said, we should assume every CPU to be compromised. And so, why? Because we're not good enough to do CPUs which are not compromised. Of course, perfect security doesn't exist, but there is a whole incentive to never go beyond a certain level of security. Have these vectors there, because not one nation, but multiple nations should be able to get in. It should be able to get in a way which is plausible deniable. And so at the end, you end up breaking everything. So it's not only governments, but it's a 14-year-old teenager from Ukraine. I still saying Ukraine, I should change country. Anybody from Ukraine?
Don't even mention that.
Okay.
Don't mention that.
Well, because they're considered some of the best hackers, so that's why I say Ukraine. But please, so maybe one more question, and then maybe we could take a little break. Anyone has any questions? Everything was perfectly in line? Okay. Please.
I'm just a little bit unclear still what the special phone on the other side does. What are you supposed to do with it? Right.
Okay, so
As opposed to so this is my phone here, I can post on Facebook, I can send messages to people. When would I want to flip?
Okay, then to explain to you, I'll give you like an image. So nowadays, all of us, if we wanted to represent our digital life today, and we're representing like 30 years ago in a physical environment in a city, it's almost like we all get to sleep in the center square of a big shopping mall, separated by cubicles. Just imagine a big shopping mall, there's a square, and we all live there and sleep, separated by cubicles, and there's floors and so on. And so the same space which is our square, street, and shopping mall, we get to sleep, do other things we do in the bedroom, living room, and so on and so forth. And it's not working. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to make you sleep in a house separated by a wall, which is the only way you can do it. And so by having a separate computing device, which has completely separate supply chain and so on, to achieve this level of security, you can and different environments in which you can do it. So practically, what can you do? So practically, if I am talking speakingly, I want to talk about how bad this politician is, and I want to meet new people, and so on, I go in the square, in the street, which are current technology, are current phones. If I want to talk to my girlfriend, to my wife, to my mistress, or I want to do political activism, e-democracy, that's where I started. That's also where David started, creating technologies to favor a democracy, in which you had the privacy to do democracy. Let's say you're an employee of Berlusconi, but you happen to be a communist or left-wing. You can't participate anywhere because that could come back to you. And so with this device, you can do whatever you think that is sensitive to you, which is private to you. It could be a political activism, sexual orientation, and all this. Except things that are illegal, because if you do things that are illegal, you always have to take in mind that if there is a judge which goes with a probable cause and legitimate lawful access, they're going to intercept you and you won't be notified. So you take the risk. If you want to do that stuff, look for other technology. Good luck if you find something to do that. So you would do everything that is sensitive to you. And the important thing is that you would do this with zero inconvenience. Basically, of course, it would be a cost, because having a device with two screens to device, it would cost more than a device which doesn't have it. But maybe you could not get the latest gadget camera or the latest Android phone and spend more for your rights. And so you'd probably end up spending exactly the same price, no? And someone in the panel before said that people don't care about this. There are surveys of US citizens by which 20% of them, it was how much would you pay per month for privacy, and it came about 20% of US citizens, about 70 million, are willing to pay $15 a month to have meaningful privacy for circular communication, social, and stuff like that. So, of course, this scenario would necessitate that other people you're talking to also have these devices. So, like many technologies, you have what is called network effect. So the value of this device to me, well, right away, at least you have freedom of thought, because nowadays not only we don't have freedom of speech or freedom of assembly, we don't even have freedom of thought. Everything you write on your phone, you have to expect that anybody else could read it. So you can't even write a note to yourself, right? So so these are some of the features that you would do, but you can even think of even more interesting things. You could actually create pseudonymous discussion places. I think Lou is old enough like me to remember when there was a saying in the internet that nobody knows you're a dog. In the internet nobody knows you're a dog. You remember this saying, no? Because at the beginning, in bulletin boards, people went to the internet and were sure that just because they changed their name, to some extent it was kind of working. They could actually impersonate other things. You could just be impersonate, like Carnival. You have the mask and so on and so forth. Nowadays, nobody has that kind of expectation because you don't have that. But that is extremely useful for fun. It's extremely useful for discussion, deliberation. You can have a deliberation by people, you know that person is within that group, but you don't know who of that group is. So this could provide social benefits, democratic organizing benefits. So anyhow, I've made this presentation long enough. I think it's time for another break, unless someone has another question.
I think you should make a clear slide saying what the private sphere does, because I don't think the case has been made, compelling case that for millions of people to use that kind of thing. Because ideally, you could for instance, could you apply this in a sandbox way on an existing phone? Not, it seems you're saying you can't. You have to explain why you can't. Why? What is the difference of just having two separate phones? I have one phone for my public, one phone for my... Okay, inconvenient, so you're slapping another... Yeah,
sure, okay, let me just give a quick answer.
That's something...
Yeah, so the quick answer to this is that having a virtualization, having basically two different spaces in the same phone didn't work because of spectrum meltdown, what we said before. Chips that are used for separating the environment can't really separate. And so there's no way to do it unless the devices are completely separated. And so this is one thing, one reason, and...
two chips where you can just flip instead of having two screens, you have two chips on the same phone, and you just flip the switch. You have phone one, phone two.
There are problems of side channel attacks, which are basically one phone compromising the other phone. But anyway, those are details that actually could actually be one way to achieve the same goal. So this is something that maybe you're gonna compete ideas or actually produce a trustless computing device that is going to be same. So thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.